Good evening, everyone, and greetings from the Texas Lutheran campus. Thank you for joining us this evening. We have a full crowd, a full screen this evening. Great event. I hope that everyone is staying safe and healthy. I'm Noel Vela, the Associate Vice President for Development and Alumni Relations. I'd like to welcome you to the Connect with Cottrell event this evening. We would love to be doing this event in person in someone's home, but unfortunately this pandemic has prevented us from doing that. However, we are very pleased and excited to be having this conversation with you virtually. At the end of the presentation, there'll be a Q&A session. I will call your name and ask you to unmute your mic in order for you to ask your question directly to Dr. Cottrell. And now I'd like to introduce Renee Rayfield, Vice President for Development and Alumni Relations.
Thank you, Noel. Like Noel said, thank you all for taking time out of your day to join us tonight to hear an update on Texas Lutheran, as well as the new strategic plan that was just approved by the Board of Regents. It's my honor to get to introduce the president of Texas Lutheran, Dr. Debbie Cottrell. I'm totally messing that name up. Before becoming president, Dr. Cottrell served as the Vice President of Academic Affairs the past 7 years at TLU. And prior to joining the TLU community, Dr. Cottrell actually served as Provost of William Peace University in North Carolina, where she led academic affairs, enrollment, and student life. She's also served as Associate Dean of the Faculty and Director of Graduate Programs at Smith College in Massachusetts. And Dr. Cottrell began her career in higher education at Cottrell College in Missouri, where she taught history and government and served as Assistant Dean of the Faculty. Now, I proudly introduce to you our 16th president of TLU, Dr. Debbie Cottrell.
Well, thank you, Renee, and hello, friends. It's so great to see you all, and so glad we can have some time together tonight, kind of wrapping up a busy week with the hometown crowd, and that's great. It's really great to be with you all. I want to do two things tonight as I visit with you. First, I want to give you a quick update on how we're doing here on campus. I know that's always a question that people have, how we're making it through. So I'll talk about that, sort of the immediate situation that we're in, and then I'll talk more about our future and about how the strategic plan has come to be and what it includes and how that gives us some guidance for the future. But let me just say again, thank you for taking the time, and I look forward to visiting with you and especially hearing your questions at the end. So if I were to try to summarize very quickly how we're doing at TLU right now on November the 18th, I guess it is, I would say we're doing pretty well. I'm really glad to be to this point. We're not all the way through the semester yet, but given everything, I'm very grateful for how things have gone this semester. We came in back in August, as many of you know, not being real sure what all we would be in for, having a plan that we hoped would get us through the semester. We were prepared for a loss of enrollment, and we did see a small dip in our fall enrollment, but not near what we thought might happen. We made significant transitions. We moved about half of our classes to online remote learning and the other half face-to-face. We de-densified our residence halls by having students live on campus, but in single rooms only. And we really lowered the activity level on campus in terms of all the great things that normally happen on a campus. We've just done a lot fewer of those for safety reasons. And so through all of that, we have seen, I would say, a minimal amount of manageable COVID activity. We typically have anywhere from 2 to 7 or 8 cases on any given day. Right now, we're on the lower end of that. I believe with 2 cases today. We do have some quarantine rooms set aside for students who are exposed to the virus and need to be quarantined if they can't leave and go home. And we've just been managing through all of those things, trying to take care of our folks and remind people to be safe and to follow our protocols. It has not been a normal semester at all, but we are fortunate that we've been able to manage things to this point. I will say that as we move towards the end of the semester, we still have some more work to do. We know the external environment is working against us right now as we see a surge really across the country and including across Texas. We also know that after any break, there's a greater likelihood for higher case numbers. So we're taking a few additional steps here in this latter part of the semester. We're actually moving some more classes online if faculty members wanted to do that and thought it would be workable for their courses. We'll see, we'll really shift after Thanksgiving to being more about 2/3 online, 1/3 face-to-face instead of 50-50 like we've been. And related to that, we'll have some students who've been living on campus who, because of the change in their courses, will likely just stay home and finish the semester at home after Thanksgiving. This is all voluntary, and we think will be a way to ensure more safety without being too disruptive here, with the goal of finishing the semester safely and in good shape, so we can come back in the spring semester. And we think spring will probably look pretty similar. We're approaching it in a similar way, with one major exception. We are working hard right now to try to bring athletics back on campus for the spring. And that's a big undertaking for all kinds of reasons, which I know you understand. But we're working right now with the NCAA and with our conferences to put things in place to have some abbreviated fall sports in the spring, and to have basketball as our winter sport, and then to ultimately have our regular spring sports. So that's sort of an overview of where we are. Again, I think we have a lot to be grateful for right now, just given everything and all the challenges around us. And I'm very grateful to the community for all they've done. Great leadership, great support. It would not be fair if I didn't say that folks are tired. This has been an unusual semester that's asked a lot of people, but there is still a great spirit, a spirit that you all know well, that bulldog spirit that keeps us going. So that's a little whirlwind of the immediate, but I'd like to segue now and talk about how important I think it is that even when you're faced with the challenges of a time like this, that you also think about the future. You really always have to be thinking about, I believe, how you're going to come through this kind of challenge, or really any challenge, and be better positioned afterwards for a strong future for the university. And so, you know, in many ways, that's what a strategic plan is all about. Sometimes I'm asked, well, you know, why have a strategic plan, or what exactly is that, or how much difference does it make? Is that one of those things you work on and then just put on the shelf and never look at? And I would say, no, it's not one of those kinds of things at all. I would also say that, to me, a strategic plan is a document, and really more than a document, that gives you focus and calls on you to prioritize and to make links between your activities and your resources, what you're doing, and also gives you the ability to choose not to do some things, because it's a way of evaluating what you're going to do. We can't do everything. And so when we're looking at evaluating opportunities, I think a well thought out strategic plan can really help with that. It's also true that strategic plans, new strategic plans, are often created when you have a new president. And I think there are a lot of reasons that is the case, because the new president is going to be thinking about the future as she envisions it and as she's working with the community. I would say at TLU, while that has happened, I would also say that as I came into the presidency, what was clear was that we needed a new strategic plan, because the old one was pretty well completed. It had been, I think, in place since 2009, and all of the major initiatives in that plan had been completed. And so that was good. In the last few years, we had just been having annual action plans, which worked okay. But what you don't get with that is sort of the cohesive, coordinated effort as you think about your future and try to look at it across a span of time. And in our case, the span that we began to think about and work on last fall was 5 years. There was a time when strategic plans were prepared for more like 10 years, if not even longer. But in recent years, there's been more of a trend towards shorter strategic plans, somewhat in recognition of how much can change in a short period of time, and how sometimes a more realistic plan is shorter, 3 to 5 being more common now. So all of that led me to want to get to work on a strategic plan last fall as I came into the presidency, and to do that work with all of our community, but especially with the president's cabinet working closely with me as we got underway. What we realized and knew as we got ready to gear up for this work was that we couldn't just jump in and start creating goals and initiatives. We couldn't just jump in and say, here's what we're going to do, or ask our community, should we do this or this? But instead, we needed to back up and put some foundational pieces in place. And those pieces include knowing that we needed a new mission statement. If you are familiar with TLU's old mission statement, it's good, but it was quite long. Several paragraphs, a lot of sentences, a lot of words, and kind of hard to pull out what was at the heart of that plan. I mean, you could do it, but it was certainly a plan that was more of a lengthy narrative rather than a focused mission statement. So we wanted to work on that. We also wanted to articulate our values. We thought we knew what they were, and we thought most people knew what they were, but we wanted to take the time to articulate those. And then also have a vision statement, which is more aspirational about what the work we do leads to, what our mission and values lead to. So those foundational pieces are where we started, and we worked at this in a lot of different ways. We brought in some outside folks to help us. We had focus groups. We set up some committees. We broke this apart into these 3 pieces. We did some revising. We got some drafts. We did some revising, sent it back out to the community, got more feedback. Lots of ways to really make this an iterative process so that we could come up with the best foundational documents as possible, because we knew those would then lead us into the actual goals and initiatives. And this was actually, looking back on it, I would say a really enjoyable process, because we were having a conversation about who we are as an institution and where we want to go. And we were doing that, I would say, with a lot of appreciation for our past. But we weren't trying to run away from anything in the past as much as we were trying to think about how to build on that past for the future. Now, this work took a while, and I would say that part of what happens when you're doing a plan like this is I think there's 2 kinds of revising that goes on. One is the wordsmithing, where you got people really slugging it out over which word is better, this word or that word. And we had a little bit of it, not any slugging, but we had a little bit of that kind of discussion about which word would be best. But the other kind of revising, even more important, is around the sort of significant level of priorities and of what really needed to be stated in terms of the ideas behind who we were and where we're headed. And there was some great conversation and work around all of that. So it took us all of the fall and really into early spring to get these foundational pieces in place, what some people refer to as setting the table for the strategic plan, but we got it done. And I'm going to read for you what the result of that initial work was, starting with our mission statement. This is our new mission statement. This is what replaced the multi-paragraph, page-long mission statement that we used to have. We now say, as a community of faith and learning, Texas Lutheran University empowers a diverse student body through an education centered on the liberal arts and professional programs. In pursuit of a more just world, TLU is committed to academic excellence, servant leadership, and career development. So that's it, just a few sentences. And I would argue that those few sentences tie directly to the spirit of the previous mission statement, but do it in a different and shorter way and really speak to the identity of TLU. As we talked about our values, I would say we thought we knew what they were, and I think where we landed is what we thought we would land on, our values being education, community, and faith. And I think that also speaks to our past as well as to our future. In the strategic plan, we did elaborate a bit on those values, but those are the 3 values that we identified. And then the third piece, a vision statement. Again, aspirational, thinking about, so if this is who we are and this is what we do and these are our values, what does that mean? And so this is what we said for a vision statement. Our mission and values lead us to a vision for the future. Through innovative liberal arts and professional programs, Texas Lutheran University will engage the aspirations of our students in an inclusive, challenging, faith-based community. The impact of a TLU education will create bold and adaptable leaders who transform society. I really appreciate that vision statement, and I think it's powerful. I think it has strong language. Most importantly, I think it articulates what TLU has been doing for a long time. Really ties to our past again in terms of the kind of work we've done and the kind of people we've turned out from our university, but also speaks to the future and how we want to continue to do that. So those were the foundational pieces, easy to summarize in short order, but it took us many months to get those all in place and to feel like we had gotten them where we needed them to be. And that brought us into January, February, around in there. We were keeping the board updated on this work. They knew what was going on, and they knew that ultimately we were going to bring them a plan that included these foundational pieces, but also had goals and initiatives. So that's what we were set to turn to next as we moved into February and then March. And so you know what happened. As we got into March, we were, of course, faced with, I would argue, one of the biggest challenges TLU has ever faced, a pandemic that we didn't have a lot of experience with. We didn't know what it was going to bring. We didn't know and still don't know how long it might last. But what we did know is that the situation called for us to put all of our attention there. We really had to focus for a while only on dealing with the pandemic, and particularly as we transitioned our campus to a remote environment very quickly, moved all of our classes online and had all of our students go home. And that was a massive undertaking carried out with a lot of hard work, but it was really all we could focus on for a while. So the strategic plan work, just as we were ready to really delve in and build it out, we set it aside. And we did that, hoping that we would get back to it later in the spring. And I'm happy to say that we were able to do that. I also think in some ways, although nobody would have wanted it to play out the way that it did, but I do think in some ways it helped us because we had a little break, just like any time when you're writing and thinking hard about something, sometimes stepping back from it can help you. But it also allowed us to recognize that what we were living through last spring and are still living through was going to impact this strategic plan one way or another. We were not simply going to be able to come back and say, well, let's create a plan and we'll just pretend like the pandemic didn't happen. Clearly, a 5-year plan was going to be impacted by the larger environment we were living through. And that led us to decide that rather than just saying this would be a 5-year plan, which it is, we would talk about it as a 1+4 year plan, meaning that this year, the first year of the plan, has to continue to acknowledge and input the impact of the pandemic, but also be set up in such a way that it can carry us through the next 4 years, knowing that we can adapt it, we can make some additions, we can put some things in for this first year that we likely will not carry across the next 4 years, make some other adjustments as needed. So it sort of reframed the way we went about this work. But we got back to it. Went through the same process again, President's Cabinet in the lead, lots of campus conversations, students, faculty, staff, alums, other supporters, just a lot of good conversation about, okay, so if this is how we've set the table, then what are we actually going to do? And again, through a very good process, we ultimately landed on 5 goals for this strategic plan. And under each goal, we have 3, 4, 5 initiatives. Again, thinking of this as a 5-year plan, but really also thinking of it with this year being somewhat of a separated part of the plan as we continue to sort through these times. So I'm going to share with you the 5 goals, and I'm going to give you a couple of examples of initiatives under each, and that'll give you a good sense of this plan. So our first goal calls for us to strengthen and expand the student experience. Absolutely logical that our first goal would focus on students, since that's why we're here. And serving our students well, no matter what, is our top priority. So this goal to me is pretty interesting because it definitely recognizes the pandemic, because the first initiative under this goal, which would never have been there in more normal times, calls for us to reopen our campus in August 2020 with attention to safety and health that has the needs created by this pandemic. Now, that might seem overly obvious, but we thought it was important to put that in this plan, because if we could not do that, if we could not reopen our campus, and if we could not be attentive to safety and health, we have no chance of the rest of this plan being successful. And so we thought it was important to say, we are going to put time, we're going to prioritize that as part of this plan and as part of our work. At the same time, we knew that other initiatives under the student experience needed to go beyond the pandemic. For example, we know that we have more work to do with the graduation and retention rates of our students. So one of the initiatives under this goal calls for us to focus on retention and graduation rates, and to be particularly attentive to the needs of students who are most at risk in these areas. And so this would be something that TLU has known and has experienced for a while as an area where we can do better. We really wanted to put it in this plan and say, we are going to work on this. We're going to prioritize it. It's not that it's easy and not that there's some quick solution, but we do want to be attentive to this, because it then speaks to better experience for our students, better outcomes, and a stronger institution. So that's goal number one. Goal number two calls for us to diversify and strengthen our academic programs. Also, no surprise that we would put this in the strategic plan, since we are an educational institution, and at the heart of what we do are our academic programs. Now, under this goal, there are a couple of examples I'll give you that I think speak to work that's underway and work that will be ahead for us. One of the initiatives here calls for us to implement a new program in nursing, which we were already working on, but we did not have it implemented when we first started working on the strategic plan. We do now. This is our accelerated nursing program located up at Resolute Hospital in New Braunfels. We started it last June. Started our first cohort then. We added another cohort in the fall, and we'll add a third cohort in February. This is a program that draws on our nursing curriculum, our traditional nursing program, but is delivered in an accelerated format, nonstop, full-time, year-round, for adult students who already have a degree, but want to retool to move into the nursing profession. We've been very pleased with our initial start. We've had, to this point, with 2 cohorts, 53 students enroll, so that exceeded our expectations. And the third cohort has, I think, close to 40 deposits already, and it's, as I said, set to start in February. I think the larger story here is, this is an example of taking a strong academic program like nursing and looking to be creative and build on it, utilize the foundation of that program, but offer some new delivery methods, some new formats, and in this case, a new location. So that's one example of an initiative under strengthening our academic programs. And I think the idea here, and the plan speaks to it, is to continue to look at how we can do more of this. So it's not just go do one program like this and be done, but to always be thinking about how we can build off of the strengths of our academic programs for some new and creative offerings. Another initiative under this goal, very important, speaks to, I think, a different need in academics, which is facilities, and specifically our science facilities. We've known for a while, not only that there's a need here, but that this is our, I would say, most serious need when we look at facilities in general, but certainly our academic facilities. We just haven't focused in this area for a variety of reasons. And the result of that is that I think I can safely argue that we've fallen behind in our science facilities. And so we want to address this, but this is a big undertaking. It's big because you're trying to anticipate the future of the sciences, which calls for, of course, a lot of critical input from the faculty and a lot of smart thinking about how do you build and invest for an area that's going to change and maybe change rapidly. What's the smartest way to go about it? It's also a big undertaking financially. These kinds of projects, you have to really be smart and have a good strategy for how you're going to raise money so that you can be successful. So in this area, for this year, our initiative calls for us to do this preliminary work to really understand what we could do, what would be needed, what would be the best way to go about it, and then how we would begin to think about the resource requirements. So that's a second initiative under strengthening our academic programs. The third goal calls for us to embrace and celebrate a culture of diversity, equity, and inclusion. I think this goal speaks to a very important and good reality for TLU, which is that over time we have become a more diverse institution. What do I mean by that? Well, I mean primarily our student body, and more diverse in a lot of ways, certainly racially more diverse in terms of the backgrounds that these students bring to our campus, religiously diverse, politically diverse. We have quite a bit of diversity among our student body. We reflect the region in so many ways. Our student demographic aligns with the demographic of this region. And again, I would say this is a great thing. It makes us a stronger institution, a more interesting institution. It means we're accessible to a wide range of students. But it also means that we have to think about how we support that diversity. It's a reality, but it also calls for us to think about what kind of support needs to be in place to ensure that we're serving these students well. And so one of the initiatives under this goal calls for us to think more and to be more active in working to have our faculty and staff diversity align more closely with our student diversity. We're not near as diverse when we look at who teaches at TLU and who works at TLU. And that's an important component that we need to think about as one way of supporting the diversity of our student body. And so this plan calls for us to be attentive to that as we build the future of TLU in terms of our employee base. Fourth goal calls for us to establish a predictable business model that provides financial stability. I suspect I don't have to emphasize to you why this is so important. It pretty much has everything to do about our future. We've got to be good managers. We've got to be able to have balanced budgets and to be attentive to what it takes to keep our revenues and our expenses in line. And that's obviously very important for all kinds of reasons. But we also have to think about kind of connecting to some things I've already said, how we can enhance our revenues and not just always be thinking about how we reduce our expenses. It's important to keep them in balance, but good if you can think about more ways to enhance those revenues. And so one of the initiatives under this goal, under goal number 4, calls for us to have a task force on revenue growth that will consist of regents, vice presidents, and faculty to think about, again, more opportunities, especially tied to our academic areas where we could add programs or build on programs, do more beyond just the example I gave earlier with nursing to enhance the revenue that comes into the university. A lot of possibilities, and some of these roads we've already begun to travel down, but we do need to do more. So I'm excited to see what this task force will come up with and the combination of people who will be on it. They're going to get underway this spring on this work. Our last goal, goal number 5, calls for us to create strong partnerships and collaborations. And I always say this goal just in translation means we can't do it alone. We have the best opportunity to be a strong institution when we are working well with others. And there are a lot of opportunities, whether you're talking about healthcare facilities or educational entities, whatever it might be. I think there's so many ways for us to think of partnerships as a way to increase our strengths, to improve efficiencies, also to be better servant leaders in our community as we think about ways that we can help others. Under this goal, one specific initiative that I'll point to calls for us to strengthen our work with churches around the state and to be attentive to church relations as a comprehensive effort that allows us to make TLU more visible, make TLU better known. And I'm talking here first and foremost about Lutheran churches, but I'm not limiting it to that because I do think connecting our university to churches and helping them understand what we do and how they can support us and how we can be a support to them really opens up a lot of opportunities for us. This is hardly a new thing. Church relations has long been important at this university. I think what we're trying to say is we see some opportunities to strengthen it and do better. And we see that in part by trying to connect several things we have going on our campus across campus ministries, across our Center for Servant Leadership, our theology department, interfaith efforts that our students are involved with. There's just a lot that we're doing. And I think we're really interested in trying to bring those efforts together and then in turn use them to support the work and the connections that we make with churches. So I've just given you a whirlwind tour of our strategic plan. And if I were going to give you the test now, the test would be this. How many foundational pieces are to this strategic plan? There are 3. We have a mission statement, we have our values, and we have our vision statement. How many goals do we have? We have 5. I've just gone through those goals with you, and each of them has initiatives under it. And how long is this plan going to last? Well, 5 years, but we're doing it 1 + 4 so that we acknowledge and work through the impact of the pandemic on this plan. I will tell you that while I think it's probably impossible to create a perfect strategic plan, I will tell you nonetheless, I'm very proud of this plan and what it represents. I'm really appreciative of the work our community did in thinking about it and talking about it and having input and making suggestions. I'm appreciative of the way this plan recognizes the important past of TLU, acknowledges the present moment, but looks firmly to the future. And I'm excited about what it will allow us to do and how we can use this plan to really launch us into some important work ahead. So whatever it is not a plan to go on the shelf. It is a plan to be lived and a plan to really guide us for the future. We took all of this work that I've just described to you to our board in October. And right before we did that, the last thing we did was Renee joined me and we had a conversation like this with local folks here from Seguin and the surrounding area. Educators and business leaders, industry leaders, people from government, so that we could share the plan with them and let them know what we were looking to do. We got great feedback, a lot of support. It was a very affirming conversation, as it was also helpful to us. And then by then we were just about to October. We took the plan to our board and happy to report we got just a few weeks ago unanimous approval for this strategic plan. And so now we're living it and we're bringing it to you. And Renee told me that once the board approved it, we were going to head out and start talking about it. And true to her word, we started doing that really with just within a matter of days, started having conversations like this to let our friends and supporters know what TLU is thinking about. So I'm going to stop with that. I'm sure there's some questions, but I'll let Noelle manage this part and let you all ask your questions.
Thank you, Dr. Cottrell, for that information on TLU today and on the focus plans that we have for our future. Yes, I am the traffic controller, I guess, so to speak, this evening for questions and for questions you might have. We have several folks on this evening. So who's the first brave soul to ask a question? Unmute your mic. If you'll just also, if you want to also give us obviously your name, but also the connection you have with TLU, whether you're an alum. If you are an alum, what year you graduated. If you're a former professor, however that would go. Thanks.
Well, I guess I can start if you want.
Okay.
I'm Chuck Ingersoll here. I'm a 74 graduate. Um, I was in the education department. I taught for 33 years and government and history. So, Mrs. Cottrell, you ought to appreciate that.
I absolutely do appreciate that.
And I also play basketball here. So I have a couple questions. Really, one had to do with the athletic portion of it, of course, and basketball was my love. And I was just wondering, if you do get a season started, do you plan for any spectators at all, or is it going to be without spectators?
Well, right now, the plan is that we would not have spectators. And of course, we know that's far from ideal, but again, it just ties into the circumstances that we're in right now. As I visited with Bill Miller and then visited with other presidents, and we talked about this, we all agreed that the first goal, the main goal, is to be able to have the competition and let our student athletes have that opportunity to play. And there was quite a bit of concern that if we tried to factor in also having spectators, we might make it harder to achieve that first goal. I would say that everything is under continual evaluation, and certainly should things improve, that issue would be looked at again. Would also say that what we said was we actually said directly we would do monthly evaluations of this decision, so that if things do improve, we would move towards having maybe limited spectators as seasons go along. But I think initially, and to get started, putting our focus and priority on getting the students out there to play and doing that in the safest way possible, that's where we want to start.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Well, I know in the past, and I think you probably still do. Do you still live stream them though?
Yes, and a lot of we do, and that will be even more important now, so that family and supporters and friends can see their students play. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I just have one more, if you can indulge me, and just
Sure.
I've been the treasurer of my church for several years now, and of course, I certainly know the economic impact this year of what this virus has done to nonprofits. And I was just wondering, how has TLU dealt with, in either a positive or negative way, to the economic impact, and how has it impacted the university, either for the negative or positive?
Well, that's a great way to put it, because we had some pretty bad things happen and we had some pretty good things happen. So on the bad side, we certainly took a revenue hit, and the primary revenue hit that we took, and it affected both last year and this year, was in a loss of room and board revenue. Last year, it hit us last year because we sent students home early and then refunded room and board from mid-March to the end of the year. And then this year, we took a hit because we have single rooms only. So we cut in half the revenue we would normally get. So other things happened that were challenging for the budget, but that was the biggest thing for sure. That just a significant hit in both years. Now, good things that happened. We were the beneficiary of CARES Act funding, as were many schools, and that made a big difference. It made a big difference for our students, because part of that money went directly to them last spring, and then part of the money went to the institution, and that really helped us. We also were the recipient of a PPP loan, not quite finalized yet, but likely to be a forgivable loan. And so those kinds of things, when you're faced with a really significant shift in your balance sheet, those kinds of things made a lot of difference. But along with that, we did take, normally you prepare a budget, and we take it in February for the next year to our board. So we did that. Then we revised it and took a revised budget in May because of what we experienced between February and May. And then because of seeing further impact on this year, we revised the budget again and took them a third version in August. So what that tells you is that things were continuing to change, and each one of those budgets reflected further expense cuts. that we felt that we had to make so that our budget would be balanced. Now, in part, those expense cuts were somewhat more manageable because our campus was less active. So there were things, I mean, for example, one example, no one's traveling right now. So any expenses that would go towards traveling are not happening. Or take athletics. They're obviously not near, there've been virtually no expenses there. But of course, we anticipate some now in the spring. So it's again, somewhat of a balancing act, but we definitely made expense reductions because we had to. The other things would not have been sufficient for where we needed our budget to be. So, none of that is easy to do, but we're fortunate in a lot of ways, not only for the things I just cited, but we're also fortunate to have a healthy endowment and to have a strong fundraising team that, through all of this has been very steady and very strong. And that also makes a big difference.
Thank you.
Thank you, Charles. And listen, if you have another question, jump right in. There's no limitations here tonight. So anyone else have a question at this time?
Sure, I'll jump in.
Okay.
Mark Gilbertson, I'm a retired philosophy professor.
Hey, Mark.
TLU has dealt with the changing demographics of this area of Texas and maybe beyond over the last decades. What is the current kind of vision maybe of TLU as far as, part of it is including greater diversity, which is our constituents, but it's been, quite a decline in, say, Lutheran students, as we traditionally drew from Lutheran churches, and you mentioned appealing to other churches as well as Lutherans, and I agree with that. But how does that change how we look at ourselves as an institution and to the future? Again, decades ago, revealing my age, the issue of the name came up again. Why do we continue to insist on calling it Texas Lutheran University? Should we somehow adjust that so that we attract more of the people, more of the students who are actually our constituents? How do we deal with that?
All right, Mark. Now, you and I might need an hour and a half to 2 hours to discuss this, but I'm going to try to get started. And I'd be disappointed if you hadn't raised such a good question like that. So, let me start by saying that when I talk about TLU and our work here, I always say there are three things that we have to focus on. The first is serving our students well, and the third is ensuring our longevity. But the middle one, and I put these together on purpose, is I say, I really believe we have to honor our faith and our diversity. And so I'm a believer that being affiliated and identified with faith-based higher education, and specifically with Lutheran higher education, is actually a huge positive. Not because the Lutherans are perfect, but because I think there are a lot of really good traditions in Lutheran higher education, a lot of really good schools in Lutheran higher education, just a lot of academic excellence that goes hand in hand with Lutheran higher education. And I think that is a plus. At the same time, I think the reality is, as you just said, because of the denomination itself and what's happening with that demographic, we're not going to see, in all likelihood, an increase in Lutheran students represented in our demographic. That's just probably not going to happen. But I think, and that speaks to all kinds of things, the Lutheran Church, as well as how students today think about denomination affiliation, just a whole lot of things going on there. The students that are coming to TLU, when you're a key part of your identity is being a Hispanic serving institution, it's that's going to probably not align with the main demographic of the Lutheran Church. But there's a way in which I think all of that is just great. I mean, it doesn't really worry me too much at all, because if we can maintain the strong relationships with Lutheran churches, even if that does not mean that we're going to have a whole lot of students coming from those churches, but it may mean other things, I think that's okay. What does the future look like? I think it's just going to be more and more diverse. But I don't think it separates us from our Lutheran ties, our Lutheran identity, and the good things that come from being part of Lutheran higher ed. As I said, Mark, I suspect we could talk about that a lot longer, and you could probably give me a lot more to think.
Let me just do one follow-up question. How, I mean, in the past, TLU has relied heavily on Lutheran donors, particularly, I think, for major gifts. Not totally, that's of course not the case, but is that still the case? That part of the reason that we hold on to our Lutheran identity is that we need that support from rich Lutherans, let me put it that way.
Well, we certainly need support. Where we've had support in the past, of course, we want to keep that support. I'll let Renee talk about to what extent Lutherans represent that support. I mean, I know that it's an important part, but I think also in not just in the immediate past, but over the years, we've also had to diversify where our support has come from, even as we, pay attention to where we've traditionally been strong. But Renee, what would you add to that?
I would say exactly that. Since I've been at Texas Lutheran and since 06, I would say that our donor base has been more diverse in terms of religious affiliations, for sure. Some of our major donors are not Lutheran. But we definitely still have, a solid group of Lutheran donors as well. And then to Dr. Cottrell's point, I think with the churches, to follow our student body, it's important for us to look and build upon the Lutheran congregations with the Lutheran Advantage Scholarship that we offer and some of those entities, but also expand beyond that to some of the congregations that we know our students are coming from, Catholic being, one of the largest, and Baptist as well. And I think that goes to the diversity that we've seen in our student population.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else have a question? There's got to be at least one or two other questions out there
I have
somewhere.
a question, and I'll maybe put my face on here. I'm Kelly Follis. I grew up in Seguin. I took a few classes at TLU. I'm a Baylor graduate, but I worked at TLU for a little while, and I have a student there now, and hopefully another student to come soon. So my question is, my comment is, I love the partnerships. Partnerships make so much sense for the good that it can do for everyone and the financial efficiency that it can bring. So that's just an aside. But my question is, I know during the pandemic, obviously the shape of learning has been so much different than in normal times. And what are you going to take with, because I know my own personal life, things have changed. And some of these things are good, and I'm going to take them with me. So what has come out of this that is really going to go forward and maybe make learning more efficient and more accessible, and maybe reach more diverse populations, through the types of things that you've had to do right now?
Right. Well, thanks, Kelly. And it's great to have you on tonight. And I appreciate your good question, and so glad that you're already a TLU parent, and maybe you're going to expand that role with sending us another one. So thank you. About a month into the pandemic, I got a message from a faculty member that said something like, "I cannot believe how many ways I can see how much better I am at teaching because of what has just been forced upon me. And that, I mean, that was early on, you know, and I thought, yeah, this is really important, right? This is people recognizing that there are things they can learn and take from this time. And he provided a long list of exact ways that he was a better teacher. I mean, for example, one of the things he said was, before the pandemic, I was always real confident how much talking I should do and how much listening they should do. And he said, you know, since the pandemic, I've realized that I need to talk, but there's some other ways to do it that, and they can learn pretty effectively, even if I'm not talking as much. That, and he had a long list of examples. But I think the point here is, I think the impact's going to come, particularly for a place like TLU, not through some radical, okay, we're going to come out of this pandemic and we're going to continue to offer X percentage of our classes online. I don't think that's where the big impact's going to be. I think it's going to be classroom by classroom, course by course, faculty by faculty member figuring out, okay, the way I'm going to deliver this course is going to change. And I'm going to continue to be that personal connector. I'm going to continue to be that person that they know they can count on to help them learn. But I might be delivering that in some different ways. And we may not be together as much of the time, as consistently as we have in the past, or we may be, or the hour that we're together may look pretty different. So I think that's where the magic is going to be, as our teachers, our faculty really think about what kind of adjustments they want to make based on what they've seen work. I also think there will be a lot of lessons about what hasn't worked and what some of the downsides are to this time, and maybe how we can be attentive to those for the future, but also appreciate moving away from those and back to the kind of education that we have typically utilized, but maybe do it in some better ways. So I think that's for me, that's how I think about it. I can't predict the future, but I think that's what I'm seeing is likely going to be the big impact. Now, I do think there's, for all of us, as you just said, we're all working differently. We're all thinking a little differently about time. We're all thinking, I think we're going to continue to ask questions, whether it be around teaching or other things, about what is the smartest way to do this, you know? So, I mean, is it going to be important for me or a faculty member to go off several times a year to a big conference and spend quite a bit of money to do that? Or are we going to do that? Are we going to still be able to get a lot out of those kinds of things by doing it remotely? I mean, I think there's going to be more development opportunities, professional development opportunities that are going to adapt somewhat. And we're all going to be eager to get back together. We know that. And we know that there are important things that happen when people are together. But I suspect it's going to be a little bit more of a hybrid going forward rather than just reverting back completely.
That's fantastic. That makes a lot of sense. And I know my kids have had opportunities to work with like Broadway stars and stuff like that they would never have had, or to hear from speakers from, you know, on different topics that they've never gotten access to. So I think that's perfect. Thank you very much.
Yeah, sure. You're welcome.
Any other questions or comments?
Yes, Barney Matoka, recently retired parish pastor.
Hey, Barney.
A comment about student recruitment in the Lutheran churches. I think there is a real need for that to be emphasized again. I know, for example, my college roommate had 3 sons, and he told me, you know, TLU never recruited one of my 3 sons, and I'm an alumni. And especially recruiting alumni children, I think, is really crucial. All 3 of our kids went to TLU and absolutely loved it, just like Lee and I did. And it's still an important institution to us. So I think some creative ways of recruiting specifically to Lutheran churches, like, for example, sending a football player dressed in his uniform and have him appear at worship, you know, to create some visual stimulation would be a great way of helping people recognize that, you know, TLU is alive and well, and kids could relate to that too, I think. We have some current students at TLU, and, you know, they were really excited, especially with the athletic program. So to me, that can be really important. The second thing is, are there any current need for volunteers on campus in any way?
The answer to that second one is always. I would say yes. You know, I don't know what you might have in mind, but if you do have some time and you want to help us out, we are always interested to hear about that. We have, you know, I mean, we're having to balance a lot right now with our environment, but I'd certainly be open to hearing more about what you might want to do and how we could utilize and take good advantage of that support. And thank you so much for that offer. I will say, I think you make a great point too about not overlooking, even if the demographics are somewhat different, not overlooking the potential to recruit students through Lutheran churches. I agree with you completely that there is still some potential there. As Renee mentioned, there's a scholarship specifically for that. And I do think that even if overall we might not expect those numbers to increase a lot percentage-wise, there's still great opportunity for us to be working with churches with the recruitment of students in mind. So thank you for that point.
Sure.
Anybody else?
Well, I wonder if I could
Yeah.
dovetail on the idea of recruiting that he brought up. I'm just curious, on a normal academic year, what is the number of students that you've been attending TLU normally?
So our full-time enrollment over the last few years has gotten right up towards 1,400. And this fall we were at 1,383, so just a little under that. Last fall was 1,406, and that's full-time. That's been a steady increase. When I came to TLU in 2012, it was hovering more in the 1,200 range, maybe a little bit above that. So we've made not huge growth, but some incremental growth up closer to 1,400. And I think when we look to the future, I certainly expect us to go beyond the 1,500 mark. But I will tell you that I think that we will get there through some of these non-traditional programs. I think our traditional base will stay strong and will grow in some ways, but I think when you look at making those kinds of leaps that will get you up, you know, to another 100, 150, 200 students, it's going to come through the non-traditional programs. I mean, this year alone, our full-time number, the potential, we already have 50. I mean, we potentially will have 85 to 95 new full-time students from one program, the new nursing program. And that is significant growth in 1 year from one program. So,
do you have any auxiliary, like off-campus TLU students? Like, for example, when I was going in the 70s, Randolph Brooks, the base there, had a strong contingent of military personnel that had and some of them came on campus, but a lot of them stayed off, and they still were taught. Is there anything like that now? Or?
So the only off-campus program we have is this new nursing program, which is housed at Resolute in New Braunfels. But I do think we'll see more of that. I can tell you that we are already looking ahead to having not a huge amount, but having carefully selected with intentional work behind it, locations that go beyond our campus here. We're very fortunate with the campus here. We have a lot of land, a large campus. We're able to really, I think, do good work with what we have here, and that will be where our focus remains. but we're also in a position where we can take our strengths in, again, very careful and intentional ways to other markets and allow us to see some growth there. So I think you'll see more of that in the future.
Is there a limit to how much you want to grow? I mean, for example, believe it or not, back in the 74, there was speculation and rumors and talk about, oh, TLU is going to go to 2,000. That's where they want to be. And of course, obviously that I didn't believe that at the time, but is that something that you really want to get really, really big? I consider that big for TLU.
Yeah. Well, again, if you if you look at our capacity, I mean, if you look at the campus we have here and you look at residential capacity, not that it could handle 2,000, but if you look at what we do have and what we could do, we could live between 1,500 and 2,000 without having to make a lot of huge adjustments. And there's a lot of reasons for that, but I think we could grow in that direction without having to make a lot of significant resource commitments and investments in our facilities. Beyond that, I think the picture changes and it would require quite a bit more investment. And you'd have to really evaluate then, what the return on investment would be for doing that.
Exactly, yeah.
So
thank you.
You're welcome.
Speaking about facilities, the science, you talked about the sciences. Was the intent or hope be that a new building would be built there where Moody Science is, or in addition to Moody Science, or what are the thoughts about expansion?
Well, kind of all of the above. So in the initial work and planning that we've done with the faculty and with some architects, what looks to be the best thinking about this kind of project right now would be both a renovation of Moody, potentially a renovation of AT&T and Crost on the ends, and then also an expansion, some additional space.
Okay. And sort of tied to that, talking about facilities, since you have students just in single rooms, what are the other students doing? The upper class persons who are living in Seguin but not on campus.
Yeah. So unfortunately, and unusually, we were not able to meet all the demand of our students who wanted to live on campus. Normally we can or can come pretty close to that. And so we worked with the students that we were not able to house, worked with them and giving them recommendations for places locally that where they could find housing, tried to put them in touch with other people to help. And ultimately, everyone was able to figure something out, but it certainly was an inconvenience when you want to live on campus and you can't. So we did have to do some real labor intensive and not always easy work to help those students. But what we did, Mark, was also we said, first, we will house our first year students, because we do have the housing requirement that they have to live on campus. And so we wanted to house those students first, and then we went up through the years so that the person most likely to not get housing would be a senior student. And you can argue, and some of them did, that didn't feel great because they'd been here and they'd given their time and commitment to TLU, and then they didn't get housing as they wanted it. But we worked very hard to help them and we worked with local apartments to understand what kind of capacity they had and to make sure they knew we were going to share their information with our students. And when all was said and done, our students were all able to find housing.
About how many students are we talking about that are off campus that wanted to be in dormitories?
Well, I think initially it was maybe 100 students roughly, as I recall, that wanted housing that didn't have it. But then as we continued to work with them, what we would find is we would go back, they would say, well, I have figured something out. So, you know, it wasn't, that number was maybe a little soft, but I think that's where we were initially when we announced the singles only.
Thank you.
Dr. Cottrell, I'm Tom Walters.
Tom, I know you from Rotary. Good to see you.
Yes, ma'am. How you talked about the CARES Act and the PPP loan. How important or critical is a second tranche of federal money going to be in your in the coming year?
I'll just say, if you have any sway with the federal government, that would be really, really good. And I think you might. So yeah, you could help us out there. You know, I was on a call today with the National Association of Independent Colleges and Universities, and the entire conversation was around this very issue. What can we expect? When can we expect it? What's the likelihood? What's the impact of the election on this? And this organization is a lobbying organization for private institutions. And their sense is that there will be another round of relief, but probably not until after the new year, which of course I think makes sense. I think the concern recently has been just that everything kind of came to a standstill. You know, last spring, not only did we get the money, we got it fast. I mean, that bill got passed quickly and money was out to us quickly. And it was so important and so helpful. And I think the hope was that we would see a repeat of that, because the challenges and the issues have continued. You know, all those things we were dealing with in the spring, it's not like they're not still with us. And I heard some presidents today express, you know, really, really strong concerns about this lag in time. And, you know, what are we supposed to be doing in the meantime? And every institution's different, but I can guarantee you that there's some institutions out there that are struggling in some significant ways. And no doubt we will all be helped when this relief package, the second relief package comes. And I think we have good reason to believe that it will, but it's kind of, what do you do in the meantime? And then also, of course, not knowing how much it might be. I mean, it's all yet still to be seen, but I think there's more hope than not that there will be another round of relief, but it's the timing of that.
Second, final question. The growth in the nursing program has certainly been noticed. Are there any new majors or professional programs in the oven right now?
Yeah, so we will continue to look at what else we need to be doing. I will tell you that we will probably do some more looking at nursing for additional programs in nursing. A master's in nursing, for example, is probably something that we will look at next as a way of building off of what we've already been doing in nursing. We've also got a new, something we've already done. We have a new master's program in education that incorporates meeting some needs in not only curriculum and instruction, but special education, where we know the needs are great and where we think we have some things to offer. But we will continue to evaluate what opportunities we have. And, you know, I think one of the great things about TLU is that we have this long history of real strength and strength and belief in the power of the liberal arts. But we have wedded that and coupled it in some pretty amazing ways with great growth in our professional programs. I mean, our largest majors: business, kinesiology, education, nursing. And while Mark and others can speak to how, you know, there can be healthy tensions when you're operating in this integrated space of professional programs in the liberal arts, I think we can also argue that it really, really helps us and helps our students to have strengths in both of those areas. And so what future majors will look like, while I don't know for sure, I wouldn't be surprised if there's further integration around those two concepts, the liberal arts and professional programs, and looking at you know, what kind of creative things we can do there.
Thank you, Tom. Any other questions here? If you have any questions beyond now, you can email them to us and we'll answer them as quickly as we can, get back to you. I would like to thank you for joining us this evening. This is a great group. It's been a great event. A lot of great questions, wonderful comments. I'm going to ask Dr. Cottrell to offer some final comments and then Renee to close us out. Dr. Cottrell.
Thank you, Noel. Well, again, to all of you, thank you so much for your time and thank you for your support and for your belief in us, certainly for your good questions and just great conversation tonight. It always means a lot to us, but I think you can appreciate the fact that all of this means even more to us right now as we're navigating these unusual times, knowing that you're out there thinking of us and working with us and staying connected with us just means the world to us. So thank you. And just know how eager we'll be to see you in person just as soon as that's safe to do. And don't hesitate to be in touch in the meantime. We'd love to hear from you anytime. Thank you.
And I just want to reiterate what's been said. Thank you so much for taking the time this evening to join us and to participate in sharing the future of Texas Lutheran. We're very excited about it, and we hope that what you've heard tonight excites you as well, because there's definitely a strong positive future for Texas Lutheran. The strategic plan is actually on the website if you want to go and look at it in full. But we will be sending you the link to the website as well as a follow-up to tonight. So expect that in the next couple of days so that you can look at it. If you have further questions, please feel free to reach out to someone in the development office, and we can answer questions or forward them to the area that needs to be forwarded to for any additional follow-up. So once again, thank you. We do look forward to seeing you in person, hopefully at some point, maybe in the spring. But thanks a lot, and you guys have a great evening, and we'll see you soon.
And happy Thanksgiving to all.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Good night.
Good night.
Oops.